Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Do More with Less, where we talk to the world's top marketing leaders, thinkers and planners to understand and share how individuals and teams are best responding to that very blunt instruction to do more with less. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be with the head of brand at challenger brand agency Eatbigfish, Helen Redstone. Helen, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you doing?
Yes, very well indeed. Very, very nice to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Listen, challenger theory is one of the things that I've been obsessed with since you guys came into my sort of field of vision. It's challenger brand theory is arguably the original do more with less playbook, right? So, and to prove just how long I've been a fanboy, right? So what the book that's absolutely right behind you on your bookshelf, which is called Overthrow. Is that Overthrow 2, though?
That is Overthrow 2, yeah, that's second edition.
I've got here my copy of Overthrow 1, and I note that in the Choueke, 3rd of September 2013, I don't know why in 2013 I was referring to myself as in third person, but and by surname only, but this was like, at Marketing Week, this was my kind of handbook for figuring out brilliant stories about brands that were on the periphery where people were like, why are you writing about these guys? Like they're doing something exceptional and different to their category. So yeah, challenger brand's always been my thing. What I didn't realize was that I was going to twin it in 2026 with do more with less. Tell me about your take on challenger, because you said when we spoke before, it's always evolving.
Yes, so I've been at Eatbigfish for an incredibly long time. I've been there for 21 years. Company was started in 1999, so I was one of the kind of early. I wasn't I was an early hire basically, and when I joined, I didn't know anything about marketing or branding or anything like that. I just knew I like this brand, I like that brand, all that sort of stuff. And the thing about challengers is that there's a lot of misconceptions about challengers, actually. Sorry, I'm going to be a bit rambly, but and it's interesting that you referenced Overthrow, because the reason behind that book was because of the frustration around a misconception about what challenger is. So often we have people who, they might come to us or we're chatting to them and they're like, oh, we're not a challenger for whatever reason, because we're a market leader, because we're X, Y, and Z. And actually, what challenger really means, so we're not a head-to-head fighter, we're not a scrappy underdog and things like that. And what challenger brand actually means is essentially the dictionary definition, aka Eating the Big Fish definition, is brands with bigger ambitions than their available resource. So challenger is really all about people who have disproportionate ambition, but are disadvantaged in some way. Usually less resource, so less physical resource, less money, less, all those sorts of things. But also less brand awareness or less market share or less distribution, all those things that kind of constrain. So essentially, challenger really means what we're always constantly trying to do is seek out those strategic executional solutions to bridge that gap. To bridge the gap between your ambition and your available resources. So challenger theory is, doing more with less always, even if you're Nike or anything like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have budget, but it definitely means that the usual ways of behaving with that budget or that resource will not work to achieve your goals. So it's always about more with less, but it's not always about zero budget. So that's the kind of, there's a difference there. So when people say like, oh, you're working with like all the world's biggest brands, they're not challengers, all that sort of stuff. We're like, well, as long as the brief is a challenger brief and they are willing to do something different and they are willing to use their resources in the way that's going to help them achieve it, then we would say that's a challenger strategy.
Yeah, I remember in a very a far less articulate way when large organizations that I'd approached for a story would say, listen, I'm not sure we're going to be that interesting. Well, we're the biggest in the market, we're the leader. So we're not actually, we're not Ryanair, we're not Scrappy. And I used to say, well, think about Virgin. And that was kind of the novice's way of saying what you just said. But what Overthrow taught me was that a challenger can come in so many different. You talked about distribution, you talked about budget, you talked about resource, you talked about brand awareness, but you had like the missionary, the democratizer, the irreverent maverick, the real and human, the visionary, the game changer, feisty underdog. You said king of shaves back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And I always used to think, so anyone can be a challenger, but what you told us just before we started recording is over your 20 years there, and one of the reasons why it's kept you really, fiery and kind of enlightened and engaged is that the very thought of what it means to be a challenger has evolved and keeps changing, because naturally something will start off as a challenger approach, become a status quo, everybody will catch up, and then what?
Hello, sorry to interrupt. Do More With Less is a podcast and a webinar and a set of events that's made possible entirely by marketing resource group Orbital X. If you would like to know how we credibly claim many millions of pounds worth of pipeline influenced by our marketing resource group support and up to 60% of your closed won deals, give us a call, half an hour with one of us, really happy to talk to you and explain how that works and how it might look for your business. Thank you for allowing this interruption. Back to the podcast.
As a challenger approach, become a status quo, everybody will catch up, and then what?
Yes, exactly. So I think, over the many years since the term challenger was sort of coined in Eating the Big Fish, the point of that book is to create a sort of a playbook, in a sense. Like, this is a strategy that we're observing in these brands that we are going to call challengers, of how they've succeeded. So it's always qualitative. It's always been based on this kind of observation of brands who are doing something different but achieving success with that difference. And I think what you're always doing in that book, sorry, I'm a bit of a challenger historian. In that book, the one of the credos is thought leadership, essentially. So if you're not the market leader, you have to be the thought leader. And by that, we sort of mean you have to be the brand that people are looking to, the brand that's getting disproportionate attention, the one that people talk about, because you're not, you can't rest on your laurels of just, generally being accepted in the kind of the conventional choice. You have to be talked about in order to be noticed. And I think we would observe that the brands that people tend to then copy, unless you're really just going to go straight down the line and go, we're going to try and be the market leader, which is just a path to nowhere, because you're never going to be able to beat them because they're already the big market leader. You're just going to be like a facsimile of that brand. The brands that people look to are the thought leaders, so they are the challengers. So if you are brands that are succeeding really well with purpose, for example, but that's a genuine purpose that's driving the brand, probably from a founder or some sort of, you're trying to make real impact on a category, then if you are a brand who is kind of looking around and going, well, what's successful? What can I do? You're all going to be drawn towards those sorts of brands. So then the whole kind of category starts to all look and behave the same, but perhaps not with the same level of sort of integrity or like real solid core truth about it. And so those brands then need to keep evolving and keep challenging the status quo, essentially. So if the status quo has become then they have to change it.
Because there's a commercial, there's almost a built-in commercial benefit to being different, to being the leader of new trends. That's the idea, I guess.
Yeah, I would say, as we know from all the, the marketing science and things like that, that we're in a battle for attention, right? And there's never been more brands out there. There's a lower barrier to entry to create a brand, to do all those things. So the fight we're all fighting over the same thing, all fighting over the same pieces of pie and all that sort of stuff. So, but there's never been more best practice. So if all the best practice, if everyone's looking at exactly the same stuff, so everyone's looking at the same consumer data, everyone's looking at the same market data, everyone's looking at all that sort of stuff. So, and we're all looking at the same tools and frameworks, everyone is going to merge into pretty much having the same strategy and the same tactics. And so therefore, as a challenger, under-resourced, all these other things, you're not going to be able to win that fight because you're doing the same thing. So I think differentiation is really important obviously it's really important. We know that as marketers, but being meaningfully different is really important. But also being able to be both consistent and evolving is a really
balance.
That's the trick. It's having something that's at your core, so you can get all the benefits of consistency. We all know that, compound creativity and all those sorts of things are what we want. But if you just remain the same, if you remain static, I think that's the thing that means that you get left behind, because you just become part of the noise, part of the status quo again.
Right. So with that in mind, Helen, if I was looking at the B2B industry and the B2B marketing discipline that I contact with every day, I get that you're a brand expert. You're not necessarily, you're a B2B marketer, but you've never painted yourself as wanting to be out there as a B2B marketing expert, but you are, you're in the game, right? And you know this brand theory as well as anybody, 20 years at Eatbigfish. I see there's never been so much available material, case studies, best practice, all the stuff you guys are doing, not just with Overthrow, but with things like the cost of being dull. And I see lots of B2B marketing directors now feeling steeped in brand theory. They know it, they've heard it, they've seen it on conference stages. They're not quite doing it. Like, I don't know if it's a fear thing, like it takes some nerve to be genuinely different. And also some smarts, because you can't just be different for the sake of it. You've got to be different for the sake of doing something you believe in.
Yeah.
Then there's, is it nerve? Is it fear? Or is it genuine? I don't know how quickly could an existing B2B business now, from scratch, develop what you would call a distinct and meaningful brand? Does it have to take years?
It's an interesting question. Because the answer is always yes and no, obviously, because I think the process of really understanding why you exist, why you're different, and why people should care that you exist, why anyone should give any sort of shit about your company's existence, can be quite a short one. Essentially that's what we do at Eatbigfish. We help our client teams to define that. And, that can take anything from, a week to 6 months or whatever it is. But depending on, so that process, that understanding of can be quite quick. And I think there's an interesting point that you made about from scratch. I think what's really important is it shouldn't feel like it's from scratch. You shouldn't feel like you're inventing something out of thin air. Like a challenger identity, the lighthouse identity as we define it, is built on rock. It's built on a product or brand truth. So normally there's an insight when we work with clients. We tend to look at the existing company, the existing data, the existing product. And what we're just trying to do is we're trying to pull out the insight, the interesting thing about it that perhaps we're not shining a light on. So it's definitely never like, okay, well, we've got a complete blank sheet of paper. What we're going to do? Let's build a brand. Because especially in B2B, you have a product. You normally have a product or service that works, that you have created because you think it adds value to your customers, to your clients, and you should hopefully be genuine. You should genuinely believe in it. So what you're just trying to do is you're trying to find the thing that gives you that sort of creative direction, so you can constantly be projecting why you're different, why anyone should care in one way. So the process of creating a kind of challenger brand strategy is can be quite short. The long-term thing, I suppose, is that element of consistency over time, which you just can't buy. You can't just immediately go, great, now everyone has developed the associations for our brand that we want. We can't get that straight away. But what you can do is you can definitely look to try and, what we call it, create symbols of reevaluation. So you can definitely try and shortcut a reappraisal of a brand, because what you really want to do is you don't want to be chopping and changing. You don't want to be changing your strategy every 2 years. You don't want to be like saying, oh, actually, I've got a new job. I'm the new, CMO of this company. I'm going to completely rebrand it. We're going to be completely different. But like, what you can do is you want people to go, okay, if I have heard of you before, for example, that was then, this is now. Like, what is different, and how do you communicate that in a way that feels memorable and visual? Like, what are you trying to say, and really try and hone in on that. So when we work with clients, we often do like a from to, like, what are we moving from and what are we moving towards? What did people think about us before? What do we want them to think about us? What's changed within our offer? And then what is the sort of, it's normally like a visual symbol or an activity. I mean, we used to, years ago, it was always about like, go out and burn something, or go out and float something down the Thames, or
Float something down the Thames, I recognise all too well. The burning shit, that's come as a surprise. We can talk about that another time, but let's, do more with listeners. Let's go burn some stuff.
No, there is a really good brand campaign for I'm going to say a burger company called Carl's Jr. in the States, who were famous for like having like really, let's say, not contemporary attitudes to women in their adverts,
right.
So it was lots of, bikinis and stuff like that. And they did a really good campaign where it was essentially Carl Jr. came back from, being away for a long time and was like, what have you done to my company? And then they went and burnt all the ads like in the desert and stuff like that. So it's the most physical representation of that. But that idea of like, that was then, this is now, how am I going to communicate that in a way that makes people really understand what's different about us? That's the shortcut.
So
but then, consistency is the
consistency piece. Mm-hmm. This is what I see in B2B. Maybe you can tell me whether it feels the same in B2C. I would suspect not as much. But the B2B problem here is that there are 1,000,001 people lining up in front of every business offering to do that vision, that workshop, that brand, that position narrative, where you sit, what you mean, and why you exist. Everyone could. Now, if you're going to hire Eatbigfish to help you with that process, you're getting the elite, right? But there's loads of people ready to do it. Like that I've been a part of a number of times, right? I think the hard bit is once the CEO, chairman, or outside of marketing executives leave that room, fully happy, satisfied, engaged, and the fire burning within them, excited, that excitement only lasts as long as it takes for them to hit their next financial report or their next restructure or the investors needing a different and so they get sucked back into the whirlwind. And the only person hanging on to that new positioning, that thing we burnt everything for, is the marketing department. And what happens then is there becomes a lack of appetite to play and practice and exploit that positioning with almost everything you do. It's not just, and sometimes it's a struggle to do this, but it's not just about making sure that collateral and messaging and ads and campaigns are like tied back to it. That's one thing, but it's almost like, how do you get to the? I wonder if Eatbigfish has trained its companies on this, but how do you get those salespeople to speak like a feisty underdog or a game changer? How do you get your outward engagement of like whatever it might be, your customer touch points? And it feels like for too many B2B companies, even if they've done that work, it sits on the wall or in a drawer. And we don't have in B2B, we don't have the training, the playbook, the infrastructure to understand how to apply that to our everyday moments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it completely does. And I think that's interesting because there's sort of two sides to what Eatbigfish does. So the most outward facing one obviously is challenger thinking. So we are the challenger people, we're obsessed with challengers, we research them, we create books and tools and frameworks, all that sort of stuff. The thing that's been sort of more like behind the scenes is the way that we work and the way that we work with clients. So we're a consultancy business. We only work in kind of facilitated, the workshops that you described kind of way. We don't do anything else for clients. We don't make anything for them. We're just a facilitative consulting business. And one of the things that we do, which when we first started, the idea of workshops and going to offsites was like a new thing, and now it's like, oh my god, I do not want to go to another offsite. Please do not make me go to an offsite. Ours are good and enjoyable, hopefully, but but what we always say is that you have to create the brand and the strategy with everyone that is going to have to execute it. So you have to, like your question about how do you get the sales team to act like a feisty underdog, is that you have to have representation from the sales team in the creation of the strategy. Because normally what happens is we have cross-functional teams. We normally, our clients normally from the marketing department, they're the people who go, right, we need to do this thing, we need to make change. But you have to bring the cross-functional teams together. You have to bring customer service together. You have to bring HR in, legal, all those things, innovation. And what you want to do is, as you're doing it, you have to always say, what does this mean for X? What does this mean for when? What does this mean for how we will do that? And in creating that, I think you're able to test the theory with the practical at the same time. So, and what we often find is you think that, head of sales or, someone from legal is going to be the most cynical person in the room, and they're going to be like, I don't. Normally, by the end of that process, they're the most engaged, because actually, it's not a new thought, but the idea that brand is not just marketing, and that brand is a direction for the company, and it helps you to make decisions, and it can, by all pulling together, we're all going the same direction. It makes life easier, all that sort of stuff. That's normally something that kind of gets, because once you start to understand that, and once you've created something together, you're not then going out and briefing people and then them getting it wrong. They're already bought in. So I think that sort of bringing people on the journey early is the important thing.
One of the most successful maneuvers we do at Orbital X is when we can find a way to get somebody senior from sales into the first meetings of an onboarding with a new client, or indeed certainly the launch of a narrative or campaign, not just because I'm desperate to be liked by everybody, but also because, sooner or later, those people are going to come to you with objections and say, that's not even how we sell, or listen, try that minute. You want those objections early, and you want to shape it around them so that they feel the ownership. And
exactly. You want it to be useful. I think if you're creating a brand, you don't want to be, none of us want to be the colouring in department. You don't want to be the person that's always trying to, turn something into I'll take this, I'll see what I can do with it, or anything like that. Or like you say, I'm also a people pleaser, so I do not want to have difficult conversations with people. I want them to agree with me, but I want to help them. And I think having someone be able to say, not just, oh, well, that's not going to work, but that's not going to work for me because, and solving that early is really helpful. And I also think, well, me personally, I'm definitely not an expert in sales. I'm definitely not an expert in, what are, if you're working in FMCG or whatever, what the customer wants. I'm definitely, so you've got to make sure that, marketers are experts in marketing. We have to know everything. You have to understand all the business, but you also have to trust that someone isn't just trying to be difficult, right? They're coming from their point of view. And I think the interesting thing you were saying about what happens when, you get back to the day job and things aren't going well, or you just have to revert back to type and things like that. I think we all have to be quite empathetic that we are all, this is all our jobs, I think. And if it's not working, it's quite hard to stay the course. So the more that you are all bought in to the long-term vision, I think the short-term difficult things that are easier. But I wouldn't, I'm definitely not someone who would just say no, this is the right way and your expertise is not valid in this room, because I think we're always trying to just have a delicate balance between that kind of, that experience and this is the way things work, and the intelligent challenge that you need in order to make things different. If this is best practice, if this is the way we sell, if this is the way we make things, if this is the thing, you don't want to rip all those things up, but you do have to be able to sort of push and say, but what if we just did that one thing differently? What would that look like?
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. I'm used to hearing and reading a lot from Adam
Mhm.
Morgan, who obviously
Our
founded
dear leader. Yeah.
our dear leader and founded and wrote the book. But I'm intrigued about what it's like to work for Eat Big Fish. So for example, how does the head of brand job work for what is pretty, I mean, I don't think it's too far off to say legendary brand consultancy. Like, what do you, where do you start and stop? Like, how do you
Mhm.
define, because you studied fine arts, right?
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure that must have some kind of value in how you personally can spot distinctive brand assets, but versus how maybe a business trained marketer might. But how does it feel working as head of brand for Adam Morgan's Eat Big Fish? Does that ever sort of land on you?
Yes. So yeah, it's interesting. When I tell people I'm the head of brand at an, globally renowned international brand consultancy, it does sound like I'm like queen of all the brands. Like
You are
I'm,
kind of
top,
queen of the
top,
brands.
top brand lady.
Yeah.
But actually, I think because I've been at Eatbigfish for so long, so Eatbigfish for 21 years, I've grown up, I'm schooled in Eatbigfish. I'm probably the sort of least impressed by us, I suppose. So people say to me like, "Oh, what's it like working with Adam? It must be amazing and inspiring." And I'm like, "No, most of the time I'm just trying to herd that cat into some sort of direction." And he won't mind me saying that. He said to me the other day, he's like, "You think everything's terrible, Helen?" So I think there's a level where I both, am completely bowled over by the talent and experience in this company, but also have a healthy relationship in the sense that it's not, we're not, I always say, like, we're not geniuses. This is the thing. So the head of brand at Eat Big Fish is basically, my job is to, essentially, I'm the B2B marketer in a team of people who are working with, lots and lots of different categories. But I would say what Eat Big Fish has is people and thinking. We are an incredibly senior group of curious, I know everyone says curious, but, genuinely interested, kind of vehement challenger fans. Like, they're so into it. Like, a bunch of nerds. They just love brand marketing, challenger, and they also love looking outside of the usual stuff. So there's always stuff going on. The job of head of brand is to try and bottle that magic a little bit, because it's so it's just all the conversations, and it's the people skill, the facilitation skills, and it's the ideas and things like that. To try and bring some level of consistency to it, because that's and to sort of herd all the cats into the same place. The challenge is when you have a bunch of incredibly well-qualified, smart brand strategists, it's very hard to tell them what to do.
Yes.
So there is a level of just making sure we're all pointing in the same direction when there are so many ideas out there. It's trying to try and give them the tools that they need to do their job, but it's also trying to create ways that they are able to execute, so everyone's on brand. And so things like tone of voice I find really difficult, because actually the people are the tone of voice. So we don't have a very good unified brand tone of voice, because actually when Adam's speaking, he's speaking as Adam. When one of the other strategists are speaking, they're speaking themselves. So
and as a people pleaser, have you had, I'm sure you have, but can you talk about, even in sort of theoretical terms, perhaps,
can throw them under the bus. That's
a situation where those bastards know where you've had to pull them into line or disagree with their sort of response, like you've had to say, listen, I know you're the smart, clever, whatever, but I'm going to need you to do it this way. Is that hard for you?
Yes, personally, in a I want everyone to like me and I hate conflict kind of way. Yes, obviously. But I think, there's always very small stuff like brand, as a brand sort of manager, head of brand, the details are important, consistency is important. And what I've learned over my 20 years is there are some people who are completely blind to some levels of inconsistency. Like if I put two different fonts in front of someone and say, which one is our brand font? They might go, I'm not sure. Are there any differences between these two things? So I'm constantly policing that sort of stuff because, consistency is really important. I think what's difficult when you're a small company with lots of ideas is just always pulling things back to, we are also a challenger company. I don't really have a marketing budget. I have a brilliant marketing person that executes for us and stuff like that, but we don't have a lot of money. So consistency is really important. Consistency of message is really important. And so when you're constantly, because we are so interested and excited about the next new thing, we often have to pull ourselves back to actually, everyone else hasn't spent 21 years being steeped in Challenger. We do have to go back to not the basics, but evergreen principles, making it simple. So I think sometimes the difficult conversations, and I'm as guilty of this sometimes, are about the fact that we're perhaps moving too far at speed, or we just need to pull ourselves back a lot more because we aren't as famous as sometimes we think we are. We aren't as understood as, Challenger isn't as understood out as we might think it is. And so to always just bring ourselves back to if someone's never heard of Eatbigfish, if someone doesn't have a real kind of scholarly understanding of our Challenger thinking, what are the key things we want to communicate? And not chasing the shiny object, but looking for the new stuff. So I think that's always the challenge, is how you kind of maintain interesting, thought-leading content without forgetting that the fundamentals are really, really important. Does that make sense?
That's amazing. Helen, are you a challenger when you leave the office? So in your personal life, do you get quite, I don't know, when you're choosing, buying, or falling in love with brands in your life, or when you go home and say, I'm really sorry, guys, but I'm going to have to be a bit challenger about the fact that the butter's on the table. Do you get quite annoying? Are you are you naturally, or have you learned to be a challenger outside of EBF, or are you kind of just Helen, and then you walk through the door and you're this big challenger brain?
I think, well, personally, yeah, I'm probably less interested in brands outside of work than I am in work. I mean, I like things. I like nice things, and I do, I'm a consumer of things as well. But I suppose I'm not, and I work with many of these nerds, so they won't mind me talking about it. I'm not a fan of marketing and advertising. I don't sit and look at YouTube videos of old adverts in my spare time, like some of the people I know. So am I a challenger? I think I'm probably interested in people and things and processes that do seek to make change, that aren't satisfied, that are kind of interesting because they are not, they're not willing to sort of settle. I'm drawn to those sorts of things. But personally, I mean, what I do now is I like to watch Gardener's World, and I like to go to pottery in my spare time, because I think it's just that feeling of, if you're always pushing and you're always trying to do things, sometimes you need to bring yourself back to just being much more grounded. Just make something. I think it's really important to feel like you're kind of, if you're existing always in the kind of cerebral and thinking and strategy level, it's actually really nice to come back and actually just produce something, or see whether my tomatoes are going to grow, or those sorts of stuff. So I'm probably operating at those two different levels quite a lot of the time, always on, always thinking, always we're always pushing, always I talk a lot, as you can probably tell from this conversation, but then just being able to go but what is the tangible, what is the thing that we are trying to make or achieve here? So that's probably
I get
two sides.
I was once called by a Coca-Cola chief executive of his day. I was out in Atlanta, and we were spending time as marketing week editor. We had some access to him and his senior team, and one of them called me constructively discontent. And I was very, very fucking happy with that. I mean, if that was on my gravestone, I would be very, very happy. And yet that's how I feel about my life and my approach and perspective to almost everything. And yet my daughter was like, Dad, honestly, you might be bigging yourself up a little bit too much. You go to garden centres. It's like, I'm walking away muttering, going, my approach to the garden is very, very distinct. So yeah, I get it. I have a final question for you, Helen. Tell us a little bit about where we're up to with the extraordinary cost of Dole project. So we have had one of your partners, Peter Field, who is my all-time greats, on Do More with Less before, and he was absolutely sensational. I know John Evans from and well, when he was with System One, and I know the System One guys, but you were very kind to send me one of the early manifestos of the Cost of Dole project, I think about a year ago. And I think it's like a 2 or 3 year thing, right? But it's a project that is literally putting numbers,
yes,
and extraordinary numbers, by the cost of being dull and boring and how much more you need to spend in order to get the same effect as a distinctive campaign. And I think you were ready to go into America and do all sorts of. Tell me where we're up to and how involved are you in that?
Where are we up to? So I'm very involved behind the scenes because I work very closely with Adam on, our new thinking and our partnerships with people and things like that. So where we're at with Cost of Dull is that it feels like it has a sort of life of its own, but it's one of those pieces of language that has really like caught fire. And I think it's doing its job, which is what we always say is we don't want to tell people to take risks or be brave. We want to give people the ammo, the tools, the frameworks, the examples, the evidence to help them to make those decisions, to do more work. It all came out of a frustration that Adam had, which is like, why is there still so much kind of dull, boring stuff out there? And his collaboration and friendship with Peter was that really helpful to put the original data on that, and then System One came on board. We did also worked with Dr. Karen Nelson Field and Amplified on Cost of Dull Media because she saw it and said, I think I've got some interesting stuff. So we did a few years of the sort of quantifying the cost of dull. And dull is we always have to use proxies for dull because no one's actually measuring dull. So, Peter's looking at rational versus emotional campaigns. System One have obviously got their like emotion tracking and those sorts of stuff. Karen Nelson Field was looking at active attention, essentially, in low attention environments. And so we're always looking for new data. So it's still ongoing. We're really interested in dull product and dull brand experience, but like finding those bits of data are kind of, we're trying to find the proxies for that at the moment. So if anyone's got any data, that we'd really like to see it. We're looking at...
I've got no data, but I've got 100 million stories to tell over a pint at some point or a coffee where I could tell you in a way that hopefully doesn't come across just too grumpy old man, all the things that really do my head in. But yeah, do go on.
And then I think from Eatbigfish's point of view, we are not the data people. We're not, we're always like you are, like stories, qualitative, like looking for things. But what we are really turning our attention to is solutions. So I think we can stand on a soapbox and moan for, as much as anyone wants to and say, why is this rubbish? Why is this rubbish? All that sort of stuff. What people don't need to be told that as much anymore. They need the facts and figures so they can make the argument for doing something different, which is what the Cost of Dull does. But no marketer needs to be told not to make rubbish stuff. Like none of us are doing that on purpose. We're just falling into traps. So the solutions to dull, we're sort of both, you can find it in the data and the latest work is all about surprise. So that's what we did at Cannes this year, was talking about like the strategic power of surprise to help with some of these things. But also you just find it through what we do, which is the looking at the stuff that gets disproportionate attention and how you do that strategically, how it's not one-offs, how it's not just here's something that got attention, but then it trickled off or all those sorts of stuff. So at Eatbigfish, we're moving from sounding the alarm and kind of standing on the soapbox about what the problem is to really trying to create tools, frameworks, examples that just help people to move from, to recognize it and then to move to something much more interesting. So that's where we're at. So lots more kind of legs in the data and looking at different markets and things like that. But I think where the interesting stuff is in the solutions.
Helen Redstone, this has been one of my favorite episodes.
Ah,
Sensational. I love it. Thank you so much for your time.
such a treat. Thank you.
Oh, well, no, like, honestly, there's no risk for me in going, Eatbigfish, let's go to Helen rather than Adam, because everybody will get Adam. But I don't know what your thoughts were or what you were thinking, but I think you've been absolutely amazing, and I think the listeners will benefit greatly. So thank you for your time.
I thank you. I hope it was useful, and I think I feel like we're always here to try and help people. Do you know what I mean? That's what I'm here to do, is to get the word out. And the best possible feedback we ever get is, I do a lot of our sort of new business calls and things like that. It's when people say, like, I read the book, or I saw this thing and I found it really useful. When people say, like, we started our business following our principles and stuff like that. That utility and finding something really useful and being able to go and do something with it is kind of what we're here for. So I hope that it is useful to your listeners.
Well, let's get the word out. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.